Okay, so we're continuing on with looking at the case of AURORA and all the reasons why, based on these documents and based how they relate to what I know about the theory and what I know from direct experience with INFPs, lots and lots of them, why I think that that would be the type she would most likely identify with. So where I left off was saying that I wanted to say something. There's this YouTuber, I hate saying that, but anyway, maker of videos on YouTube called Joshua L, and he's an INTP, and I just want to say, go check out his stuff. He's doing some really excellent theorizing about the MBTI, and jumping off from there into all kinds of interesting stuff, and I think his work is really good. So he has a video, I think one of the earliest ones he posted on his channel, in which he talks about how it is that he thinks that the NF idealist types, those four, are ones that are the most charged, both in terms of numbers of them, proportion of them, and also the weight, with having to grapple with the heavy weight of existentialism. Anyway, he's got some very interesting ideas there. And taking off from what he was saying, I think that I would say that the INFP's existential burden is the heaviest of all of us. That's because it's a soggy one. Not to say that other types don't suffer for having both a very marked leaning for abstract thinking, for conceptualizing, for seeing a big picture view of the external world, for having all kinds of complexity to their character, for having an immense creativity, and what the INFP. So I mean, you could say the other INFs can suffer greatly for that stuff as well. But the thing is with INFPs is what they have as in addition to all of that is an inborn emphasis upon individualism, which is at the heart of existentialist thought and existentialist choices. The weight of responsibility that someone with FI in the dominant position would feel for doing the right thing. Reckoning what the right thing is when you have FI in prominence is a very much more complicated matter than if you have FE. And again, just see, I don't even know how many videos I've made now for more on that. And then in addition to that, what INFP has to deal with that none of the others do, that have that combination that I just mentioned, is it's soggy as hell. I mean, they also get to feel everything extremely intensely. So I'm not, and again, I really don't, obviously I'm ambivalent because I've been sort of stumbling upon this and obviously not settled about it. I really don't want to, I don't want to do anybody any disservice by playing up any sort of melodramatic stereotyping of INFP. And there are just so many reasons for that. INFPs already get all kinds of shit for the emotionalism that is a part of their temperament. They get so much shit for it, and I just don't want them to have any more. At the same time, though, I want to be honest and talk about what I do see and what I think there's a lot of evidence for, and what INFPs have endorsed to me directly. It's a lot for them to manage, taking all that they see and then all that they think in an intellectual sense, and then on top of that, all that they feel very, very intensely all the time. There's no off switch for them. There's no let's go into some heavy, theoretical stuff that's purely cerebral and TI oriented and get some relief. They don't have that option. Not for very long. Not like some of the other super intense, philosophically minded, blah, blah, blah types, so-called deep types. it's a lot. It's a lot to manage. All right, so going back to this the Verge text, where was that? I'll finish up with that. Yeah, there we say, in person, Aurora doesn't seem broken. No, she doesn't. In fact, she seems, at the beginning of that video before her song, she looks really sprightly, doesn't she? I was just talking about how extra sort of expressive her face is. But what you'll see there that's also very characteristically FI, very heavy FI, is look at how raw the emotion is on her face. Now she's smiling and smiling, and she's, again, talking in that interview, she's talking about personal stories. And again, like, is this all her? No. I mean, this is what was shown to us. It has to do with what the editor chose to show, and it had to do with what the interviewer was asking her. But notice how the way she tells her stories about, I have a little house by the ocean on the west coast of Norway. Every introvert's dream, right? And so there she is there, and she's talking about how she first learned to love music. And I mean, it just, the rawness of the emotion coming out of her in her expression when she says, when I first was playing the piano when I was 6 years old, she said, and I felt so alive. I mean, it's just, it's almost too much. And that's the thing with INFPs, is that, the kind of emotion that they have, the depth of emotion that they have all the time. I think part of the reason why they get so much shit is because we can't handle it. We can't handle it. Anyway, that's coming up. I'm more about that later. All right, back to Aurora. All right, so she does, she is quite sprightly and smiles a lot and whatever. But I will also invite you to see, in terms of this melancholy thing, when she talks about the meaning of her song Warrior, where she prefaces it and says that, what it's about is about, this disappointment, this disillusionment, which is, and that is what all INFPs will deal with. I don't mean to imply that all INFPs are going to suffer massive depression, or that they're all going to just struggle and struggle and struggle. Again, I do not mean to imply that. But here's what I would say. While it might be the case that most so-called deep people will at some point in their lives experience what you'd call a dark night of the soul, I would say that for most, people of all the other types, it might be optional that you would. You might be able to sidestep that kind of thing. You might be able to be pretty smart and pretty, think pretty in the big picture sense, and think about those kinds of things and meaning of life and all of that. But you might be able to sidestep, feeling that heaviness. But the INFP doesn't have that luxury, which is something I would like people to remember when they have an urge to crapple over the INFPs for what the INFPs have difficulty with in the humdrum, mundane parts of life. They're busy dealing with a bunch of other shit that most of us can't even begin to imagine. So that's what I would like to bring forth in this video and others. All right, back to Aurora. Sorry. All right. I'm reading from it. In person, Aurora doesn't seem broken. She's friendly and thoughtful, measuring her answers to my questions with soft, careful precision. Her fingers flicker in the air as she talks, as if she's literally trying to grab words out of the sky. The way she speaks feels parallel to the way she makes music, scrupulous, aware of every detail. And here's the thing, too, just as an aside, it's said in Kiersey's typology and his writing on it, and it's just observed in all kinds of places. It's a funny thing with INFPs. They're known for having very messy houses a lot of the time, just like the ENFPs, just like lots of the perceiver types. But here's the thing, when it comes to their work, though, they are so perfectionist. They are so, I don't even know if, I might nominate them as the type the most likely to be tempted to completely destroy entire months, maybe even years of work in a fit of pique. They just get rid of it because it doesn't because the fact that their idealism is so high and their feelings about everything are so strong and deep that they can't, sometimes they just can't stand the disparity between what is and what they can think of and what they can dream, and it's just, it's very hard for them to bear. Anyhow, so they can be extremely perfect. It's funny, they can be very, very, very persnickety though when it comes to their work. If it has anything to do, if it's something they care about, their creative work, for example, they will make sure that everything is perfect before they let anybody see it. They will do that to the greatest extent possible. So they can be very controlling that way. Right, so now nearing the end of a massive world tour, Aurora is ready to head back to her tiny hometown. Before she does, I caught up with her in a park in New York City. We talked about all my demons and the mystery of Snapchat and the default state of being sad. So again, for all her smile, that's all real. You can see it, right? You can see the that's what took me up so much, is that the authenticity is just, the rawness is so apparent in her expression. And yeah, I would say too about the feeling, like you see all this sort of the smiling and so on, and this sort of sprightly, whimsical sort of exterior. But I'd invite, I did this with my friend, and I'll put this up right now if I wasn't worried about copyright trouble with YouTube. But here's the thing, I invite you to look at the last few frames in that Red Bull Academy video that I'll link below, the one where she performs the song Warrior. Look at the very end of at the beginning of it, where she's talking about the song, right before it transitions into her performance of the song, and right before that cut. I ask you to, like, when the smile just starts, the corners of the mouth start to just go straight, to freeze it and take a good look, and try and look back in her eyes if you can. Like, just try and look what's back there in her eyes. What's clear to me anyway, what I can see, is there's this she's 19 years old. I mean, look at her, so young. And already there is this sort of, with all the smiling and the cute sprightliness and whatever, like, look in those eyes. There's a very weary, deep sadness already in the back of those eyes. Yeah, and so, Sukat David, she's, anyway, has made some fantastic videos, and she's, in her own words, and I agree with her, based on having seen her work and her terrific comments, she's a very particularly cerebral INFP, but absolutely an INFP, very knowledgeable about Jungian typology, and she has some comments under some of my recent videos, and she talks about how she believes too Aurora is a terrific figure of an INFP to look at, and she talks about in the comments, go check them out, very smart, very interesting. She talks about this sort of misperception that is very common of INFPs that turns them into jokes, basically, that presumes that because that there can be an appearance of whimsy on the outside with INFPs, and there certainly can be a great deal of humor in how they dress, and they're dressing colorfully, stuff like that, and being kind of spacey and dreamy, some of them. But Sukat David and I, and anyone who knows INFPs to any depth, in any great number, we can say that there's a very, very, whatever you may see on the outside, there's a very serious person in there. A very, very deeply feeling person, and probably a very deeply thinking person also, who may not express very much to very many people at all about what's going on in there. All right, anyway, yeah, I mean, you're much more likely to find out about what a greater extent of what INFPs are thinking through their writing rather than what they're saying. You'll also see it in their actions. That's the sort of the FI driving things too. All right, now she's being asked these questions. Here we go. So the first one, now that the album's been out for about a month, how do you feel about the reception it's gotten? she says, you want the album to be everything, to be exhausting, to be fantastic. I'm very picky. I'm never happy with anything. I've so seen this with my INFP artist friends. It's so hard to give the record away and accept that you're done, and people are going to have it in their homes. I struggle so much, again, personal angle. I struggle so much with being satisfied. It's very nice to see people being satisfied. It makes me think that maybe there's something good after all. So again, this self-doubt and this searching and this perfectionism and the idealism and all of that. I mean, that's just a constant thing for INFPs. So when you start to write a song, where do you usually begin? And she says, well, it depends. Anything there? No, okay. Nothing I haven't covered already. Look at that. The interviewer asked us, one thing that's interesting to me about your album is that it feels in awe of the world. This is just all INFP. I just can't even believe it. This is why I only need one article here, because it's very rare that you just have such, everything just laid out for you, type-wise. I really feel that it's there. I think that it's there. One thing that's interesting to me about our album is that it feels in awe of the world, but also a little bit world-weary. And she says, I have this feeling that the world is not in balance. People are afraid. So she starts talking about a lot of sort of generalities here. So this is where the sort of, more just sort of dreamy, seeing things in a sort of general sense, getting impressions of things comes out, I think, in what she says. People are afraid. We're also starting to be really brave. We're protesting against what's unfair, and we're trying to fix problems, at least as many as we can.